Well, good morning.
Morning.
Thank you, Carrie, for that. Oh,
You killed it.
I did it.
Hey,
Jeez.
there's always one.
That's the American. Comes in and breaks things. He's living up to the stereotype. Hey, it is great to be here. I'm glad that I get to be here. The fact that we get to travel over and just to visit you and to be here is really one of the most special things that we get to do. We love coming back. We love seeing familiar faces, which speaks to the strength and the community and the love here. We love seeing new faces, which speaks to the growth and the vitality and the curiosity that's here. And I love that, and I love all of that. We had a great time on Friday at the all-team meeting. Who was here at the all-team meeting? That was a blast. And again, just seeing the the familiar and the new, and to hear the vision that Johnny and Tasha have for Liberty Church was inspiring, and it was exciting. We had a lot of fun. We played some games, and that was an interesting experience. Always is playing games. What really, I think the one thing that I took away from that was how terrible you all are at the alphabet. I think that really was, no, that's right. Mitch was we were on the winning team and he led it. But besides Mitch, no one else really knows the alphabet here, which is interesting because you invented the language, right? I mean, we perfected it, obviously, but I mean, I feel like, come on, I kid. Hey, I want to, before we really jump into things, I just want to honor a few people. I want to honor Anthony, and just the value that he has added. Can we just hear for Anthony? I can see and just feel from each time we get to be here, just the incredible value that he's added here and the value that he's added to Johnny and Tasha in their lives. And we're just so honored to have him on the Liberty team. And we got to spend some time yesterday hanging out in the cold. You know, it's always cold and gray here. Yeah. And but just hearing the call of God on his life is beautiful. And you guys are very, very blessed to have him. And I also want to honor, let's just give it up for Johnny and Tasha, your pastors. Man, what a privilege it is to be just to be involved and to be in their lives and to watch them and to watch the growth that is happening and the momentum that's happening here. And Johnny and Tasha are people of love. Like, get to know them and they'll love you. And they're people of love. They're people of vision. They've got incredible vision. And they're those genuine friends that you want to have in your life. And they're also people of strategy. And I know that sounds like a funny thing to say, but right now Tasha is just like, yeah, exactly. But everything they do is intentional and they think it through. And I see it from visit to visit, how there are little tweaks here and there, and they're all purposeful and intentional. And that's a good combination to have in leaders in your church. And those are people that you can trust. So one more time, let's just give it up for Johnny and Tasha. So as Johnny said, we're part of Liberty Church. We're a growing global family of Jesus-centered local churches. And that's really who we are. We really believe as a church, we just believe this because it's in the Bible, that God has called each and every one of us, right, to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And a lot of times the challenges of life would drive us into ourselves and we isolate. And God is always calling us to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And that's why we love being a part of this church. The local church is stronger when it's a part of a global family. And it can accomplish more when we work together as churches than any one church could ever accomplish on its own. But also the global family is made stronger by local churches like Liberty London. And we just felt, and we've just been sensing and talking about this, that we're just sensing that Liberty London is on a verge of a breakthrough. That we just see from visit to visit, we feel it when we're here. There's growing in, consistency on Sundays. There's growing in involvement in community groups. There's growing in being on the team. But there's also just this growing of energy and vision that we can sense here. And we're just praying for you and believing and excited to come back. And I just want to encourage you to lean in, because this is a season right now that you're going to see this breakthrough happen. And we're really believing that for you and sensing that. So we're excited for it. We're glad to be here. We are 1 week away from Easter, Resurrection Sunday, the day that we celebrate that changed everything for everyone when Jesus defeated death and rose from the dead, and it brought us into that reality. Death was undone and is undone for us. And, throughout this series, we have been talking about throughout the last week, kind of the last words of Christ during his last week and the things that he said and how and why what he said then matters for us now. And so today what we're going to do, next week we're going to talk about the resurrection. Today we're going to talk about the death of Jesus. We're going to talk about some things that he said on the cross and why that matters for us. But to begin, I'm going to ask Claudia come up, and we are going to begin with the reading of Scripture. So would you please stand with me to honor the Word?
The reading today is from Luke 23, NIV version, 32 to 43. 2 other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there, along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others. Let him save himself, if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine, vinegar, and said, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was a written notice above him, which read, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said, "since you are under the same sentence. We are punished justly for what we are getting, what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus answered him, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise."
Thank you. You may be seated. So depending on your church background and your church experience, you may find it odd that we spend so much time talking about and really celebrating the death of Jesus. Why we give so much attention to Christ's death. Like resurrection, that's victory, that makes sense. But death, that's loss. Why do we lean into this so much? My best friend in the world, he does not believe in Jesus and does not understand why I do. And on Good Friday, every Good Friday, he sends me a text message, just 4 words: "Sorry for your loss." Yeah, it's sarcastic. I definitely see the humor in it. And I can't help but laugh. It's the worst when he times it to send it during my Good Friday message. But I get it, and I understand why it doesn't make sense to him. I mean, why would we celebrate the death of Jesus and even call it a good day? I think there's actually a few reasons why we do. But to really understand them, I think we first have to embrace a truth that we spend a lot of time wanting to not think about and trying to ignore. And it's this: the death is necessary. Even for Jesus, death was necessary. Not because of his sin, but to pay for ours. His death was necessary so that he could put an end to the threat of death for us. So that death for us is no longer an end, but a portal to a new life. But still in that, death is necessary. It's a necessary part of life. In fact, the Bible tells us this. The New Testament book of Hebrews says that people are destined to die once, and after that, to face the judgment. In the book of Ecclesiastes, it says this. It says, everyone shares a common destiny. The righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, the clean and the unclean, those who sacrifice and those who neglect the sacrifices. The good and the faithful are treated no differently than the sinner. Those who take an oath are treated no differently than those afraid to commit. Such a great injustice. Here is an evil that pervades all that is done under the sun. The same destiny happens to us all. Human hearts are inclined toward evil. Madness runs deep throughout our lives. And then what happens? We die. Good morning. Welcome to church. Just wanted to brighten your day. Death was not a part of God's original creation. But because of sin and evil that pervades our experience, that pervades humanity, all of creation is now subject to this reality. Nobody escapes it. Death is necessary. And yet here's the beautiful truth that we see in Christ's death. That while experiencing death is necessary for us all, letting death win isn't. I grew up a Christian, and so I've always known the story of Jesus' death and resurrection. But for me, his death and Easter, his resurrection, and this time of year has become extremely personal. This time of year means something different to me. It hits differently for me than it used to when I was growing up. It was 25 years ago this month that my brother Matthew died at 19 years old. Matthew was an incredible human being. I've never met anybody who was more kind, who was more generous, more loving than him. He was so incredibly talented, an incredible musician and a writer, and he was a worshiper. He loved God, and he was my best friend. We had our life planned out. We were gonna grow up and spend life together, and get married and raise our kids together. We had plans for ministry together. And then all of that ended one morning when he died unexpectedly, just in his sleep. And I'll never forget, even though it's been 25 years, I'll never forget that morning when what woke me up was my mom screaming from the other room. And it's been 25 years. And going in there and finding him and being on the phone with 911 and trying to bring him back. But it was too late at that point. And his heart had just stopped. We've never got a good explanation for it. And it was the night before April 17th. It was our last day together. And we didn't know that it was going to be our last day together. Or else we would have done something cool, In fact, we did the opposite of that. We went to the mall. And do you have the malls here? Yeah. There was no groan, so I didn't know. Are malls cool here? Okay. So anyway, we went to the mall, and we got Chinese food from the food court, and then we went home and watched just a terrible movie that I'm not even sure we watched the end of, and then that was it. And I've gotten to a point where, I understand that real life is like that. That there's actually far more regular moments than there are epic moments in our life. And I've learned to find joy then in that. And joy in the mundane moments, in the little things. In fact, I've stopped mourning April 18th as the day of his death. And now I celebrate April 17th every year as the day that we share life together. And so every April 17th, I get Chinese food takeout and I watch some really terrible movie on Netflix. And it's why Easter is so important to me and why it's so personal for me. Because Easter is the day that we celebrate life. It's the day that we celebrate that life defeats death. And that all who put trust in Jesus, in the end, for us, life wins. In other words, death is necessary for us all. It's a part of life that's unavoidable. But letting death win in our lives is not. Yet this is a choice that we have to make. We see this vividly brought out in this story that we read of Jesus on the cross. We see in some of the last words of Jesus an invitation to us all to make that determination that we are going to not let death win in our lives. Let me show you what I mean. So in verse 34, Jesus, as he hung on the cross, he says this. I mean, picture this. He says, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Like, can you even imagine that? From the cross, his body is shredded at this point. He's bleeding. His skin is in ribbons. Nails are through his wrists and his feet. He's hanging naked, humiliated on this road, beaten beyond recognition. He's hung between criminals. He's hung like he's a common criminal. And Jesus says, speaking about those who've done this to him, "Father, forgive them." Like, this blows me away every time. I fall in love with Jesus every single time that I read this. I mean, this is good news for me. That in his dying breath, he would say, "Father, forgive them." That he asks for my forgiveness. It's this beautiful good news truth of God's love for every human being, that while death is necessary, living stuck in unforgiveness isn't. While death is necessary, living stuck in unforgiveness isn't. Like, no matter what you have done, no matter what you believe, God's prayer for you is forgiveness. In his death, Jesus is saying, look, you're the ones who sinned, but I'm going to take this on myself. I will pay the price of this forgiveness. That's how much I love you. That's how much relationship with you matters to me. And Romans, a writer named Paul, he wrote in the letter of Romans to say that, look, this forgiveness is available to every single person. He said, God presented Jesus as the sacrifice for sin, meaning he's dealt now with sin. People are made right with God when they believe that Jesus sacrificed his life, shedding his blood. Meaning, look, we do have to die. Every one of us have to die, but we don't have to die in our sin. You don't have to let death win. We can come to Jesus. We can receive forgiveness. We can experience a relationship with God here and now, a relationship that will last forever. This is true for you. It's also true for your friends. There's Jesus' brother, James, he wrote and he said this. He says, "My dear brothers and sisters, if someone among you wanders away from the truth and is brought back, you can be sure that whoever brings the sinner back from wandering will save that person from death and bring about the forgiveness of many sins." Easter Sunday is next Sunday. It's the ultimate invite Sunday. It's the perfect day to invite your friends to join you here at Liberty. If they will come, they will hear the good news of God's love for them. They will hear the good news that they'll be invited to turn toward God and receive this forgiveness, that they don't have to be stuck in this place of separation. They can receive this forgiveness. And you can be a part of that. On your seat, there's a little card that says "You Matter." And on that with that card, you can use that to invite friends and family members to come with you. I read a statistic. I was looking up what is the situation here in the UK versus the US when it comes to invitation. And you know, there are 3 million people in the UK. This is BBC's survey. 3 million people said that they have left church, but they would come back if they received an invitation. But only 2% of Christians have ever invited someone to church. So there are yeses out there just waiting for that invitation. So just try it. See what happens. You could be a part of leading someone back to God. I believe there's something else in this, though, that just as we've been forgiven, we're also free to forgive. This one's the more challenging one for me. Because I'm going to just tell you, if I were on the cross and that were my situation, I'd say, Father, forget them, but not forgive them. You know, maybe you've got someone in your past, or maybe someone in your present who has hurt you. Maybe there's some way that your life has been affected so deeply, so thoroughly, that they've almost left you an unrecognizable form of who you were. Father, forget them may make more sense to you. But refusing to forgive is in itself a way of death. It not only suffocates that relationship to death, but it also poisons our minds and our hearts towards ourselves, towards future relationships. It drowns our soul. It's one way that death can win in your life if you refuse to forgive. Like I'm sure you've heard it 1,000 times, right? Like withholding forgiveness is like lighting yourself on fire and hoping the other person dies of smoke inhalation. But Jesus, because he has freed us from sin, he's also freed us from that death of living in unforgiveness. Maybe unforgiveness is something that you're holding on to. It's nailed you to some past moment, some broken relationship. It has weighed down your heart for too long. I want to invite you to not let death win in your life. I want to invite you to take that step of forgiveness, to say, even though it hurts, Father, forgive them. You are forgiven. You can forgive. Death is necessary. Living stuck in unforgiveness isn't. The second statement that we hear Jesus make on the cross was to the criminal himself. The criminal calls out to Jesus, and Jesus says to him, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. Again, it's this beautiful good news truth that while death is necessary, living separated from God isn't. This is a beautiful reminder that, you know, Jesus does not see you as the sum of your sins. People may label you. You may label yourself. But Jesus does not label you by your weaknesses or your selfishness or your sin. Jesus invites us instead to find a new label, to identify ourselves as his, to identify ourselves as belonging to Jesus. And he says to everyone who will change that label, who will say, I identify myself with Jesus, to everyone who will put our trust in him, he says, you will be with me in paradise. Here's how Jesus said it. He said, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even though they die, the ones who believe in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will ultimately, in the end, never die. Death is necessary, but because of Jesus, death doesn't get to win. And look, this is a promise for life after death, right? But it's also a promise for the kind of life that we can experience here and now. Scriptures often talk about a veil, a spiritual veil that covers people's minds and hearts when it comes to knowing God and their relationship with God. But Paul, the Apostle Paul writes this. He says, whenever someone turns to the Lord, when you invite Jesus into your life, what happens is that veil is taken away. For the Lord is the Spirit, and wherever the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. Imagine your whole life, living your whole life with a cloth over your face. And you can't see where you're going. You can't see where you are. You don't know where when you're going in the wrong direction. You don't know what you're going to run into. You don't know what's in your way. You don't know what dangers are in front of you that you could otherwise avoid. That's how we live spiritually when we live separated from God. But Paul said all of us who have that veil removed now can see and can reflect the glory of God. And the Lord, who is the Spirit, makes us more and more like him as we are changed into his glorious image. To say it another way, since Christ died for us, we are free to live for him. The good news of Jesus is that while death is necessary, separation from God is unnecessary. It's unnecessary forever. It's unnecessary here and now. After that, the chaos of that morning of my brother's death, that afternoon after Matthew's body had been taken away, I went into his room, and I had one of those moments, and I hope that you've had them. One of those moments where you just really feel like God sees you and that God cares. Matthew's Bible was open next to his bed, and it was open to Psalm 73, and he had underlined 2 verses near the end of that psalm, and it says this. It says, "Whom have I in heaven but you? And besides you I desire nothing on earth. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever." My flesh and my heart may fail. The reality is they will fail. But that's not the question. The important question for all of us to answer for ourselves is, who's the strength of my heart? To whom have I given my heart? To whom have I entrusted my life? Here and now. In other words, death is necessary for us all, but letting death win in our lives is not. Who we will trust, if we will put our trust in Jesus, if we'll rest our heart in him, both here and now, that will determine whether or not death wins or loses in our lives. I'm going to ask the band to return. I just want to talk real quickly about how we respond and how can we respond to this. How do we keep from letting death win in our lives? So this story of Jesus on the cross, it ends with him breathing his last. He dies. And then Luke tells us this. He tells us about 2 reactions to this whole moment. He says, when all the people who had gathered to witness this sight saw what took place, they beat their breasts and went away. But all those who knew him, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance, watching these things. Luke tells us that in response to what they saw in Jesus, there were 2 reactions. Some people just walked away unchanged. They came disbelieving, and they left disbelieving. Others, however, those who knew him, could not look away. Like a beautiful sunset that you can't look away from. Jesus is that something beautiful, even in his death, in whom we find forgiveness and freedom and life, but only if we will choose to not look away. I don't know where you are in your relationship with Jesus. I don't know what pain you walked in with today. I don't know how death has affected you personally. I don't know what burdens of unforgiveness that you have, what you may not yet understand. I don't know if you feel in your own life disconnected from God. But I want to invite you to not look away from Jesus. Don't look away from who he is and what he's done for you and what he wants to do in your life. Don't look away from the forgiveness and the freedom and the life with God that his death has won for you. The scriptures promise this, that if you will declare with your mouth, Jesus is Lord, and you'll believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. You will receive that forgiveness. You will receive that life, that connection, that relationship with God. So this morning, before we're going to sing some more songs, but before we close, before we do all of that, I just want to give you an opportunity. If you want to know for sure that your sins are forgiven, that you are right with God, and that you are connected to the kind of life that God has in mind for you, I want you to know it's as simple as saying yes to Jesus. It's as simple as saying, yes, I invite you into my life. I'm going to trust my heart to you. But that's a really personal decision. So I would ask, before we move on, before we stand up, could we just, in this moment, would you just bow your head and just take this moment, you and God, in this moment. If you would say, I want to say yes to Jesus. I want to turn to him and invite him into my life for forgiveness, to make me right with him, to connect me to the kind of life that he's created me to have. Then I just want to lead you in a short prayer today. If that's you, you say, I want to say yes to Jesus. Would you just slip your hand up so I could see it? Yes. Yes. You can put them down. Anybody else? Say, I want to say yes to Jesus today. So I want to pray, and I want to invite you, if you raised your hand, I want to invite you to pray with me. And if you didn't, but you would say, but this is me, and I want to make sure, and I want to commit or recommit my life to Jesus today, I want to invite you to pray after me. They're my words, but as I pray them, God is responding to your response to him. And if you're already a follower of Jesus in this room, would you pray it out with me also, so that no one has to pray alone? Jesus, thank you for seeing me, not giving up on me, loving me, dying for me, defeating death for me, and inviting me to know you, to be yours. I believe in you. I put my trust in you. I invite you to be my Savior, the leader of my life. Help me to follow you. Amen. Amen. Would you stand with me? We're going to sing. I just want to say, if you made that decision today, you made the most important decision of your life. You stepped across. The Bible says that move is like stepping from death to life. And all of heaven celebrates that. Would you just join heaven with me and celebrate those who said yes to Jesus today?